Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. Whew. I'm so grateful that you're here. We are getting just saturated with Palo Santo smoke right now, which I really feel like is exactly what we need. Let's draw in those types of energies that we want to surround us. That's what Palo Santo is really, really good for. Not so much of a clearing as much as an invitation, right? It is enticing and has a sweet smell in its woody way. So welcome to Catalyst Energies, everyone. Thank you for being here. This is the Catalyst Astrology Report. We're going to look at the weekend's astrology. We are going to look at the week ahead. We have another week of heavy hitting transits. Jupiter's going to move into Aries. Mercury's going to station retrograde in its home sign of Gemini. And we're going to have a full moon lunar eclipse in Scorpio on the 16th. So I hope everyone is doing well, taking very good care of themselves. There are some logistical changes that I'd like to share with you before we get into today's report. If you are a regular viewer, you may have noticed that I haven't been posting as much this week. I usually do the daily medicine transmissions. Those are no more. I am consolidating a lot of my efforts into new things, and so a good way to keep in touch with that type of stuff is to either get on our social media platform, which is Telegram, and there's a private chat group there, or to sign up for the email list for free. That's through the website. You can just go to catalystenergies.net, pops up on the home screen, and you can just sign up, and that's where I really do a lot of the staying in touch and letting you know what's happening. So the details are going to be put out in those formats, but I am offering a new tier level to my monthly subscriber platform and profile on Subscribestar. It's called Catalyst Classroom. So you get all the Starseed Fellowship content that has been offered so far, plus there is a bi-weekly Zoom lecture that I'm going to give based on content that seems appropriate to cover. So I would go into more depth into astrology, into starseed related topics, how they fit into what is going on for all of us right now, and give a space for question and answer, share our charts, get insight, guidance, etc. So that is in the description box below, the link to Subscribestar. So if you're interested in that, you can check that out. So I have been writing more. I'm posting posts on the daily about the astrology and the daily energies on Telegram. So that's a great place to check in if you're interested in using that as social media. I can definitely feel a disengagement in general from social media, which I think is a good thing. And the desire with Venus and Aries, right? Talk about desire for relationship, for meaningful relationship is really, really strong right now. And the converse of that is the feelings of isolation, the feelings of lacking human connection, the feelings of and the experience of what seems like an almost forced or structured isolation that is necessary for all of us to get so much deeper into the medium of our own growth. We had solar eclipse, a new moon solar eclipse in Taurus. We just had Beltane and the Sun Uranus conjunction. I wrote a lot about that on Telegram. So there's a lot of change. There's a lot of the individual voice in a harmonic with this higher level of consciousness. It can be disruptive. It can be certainly irritating. I know a lot of people are struggling with sleep so much. We're going to look at the Schumann. I have felt a shift though, and I'm going to show you in my amateur and my novice observation a subtle shift that shows me that there is actually something that has changed. And maybe this Sun-Uranus conjunction wasn't as dynamic as it could have been. For other people, it may have been, and it's been building, right? And now it's kind of on the other side of it. So the Sun will still be in conjunction with Uranus for the next, day or so in terms of a very tight orb, as they call it in astrology. But there is Sometimes it's just innovation, right? Sometimes it's just being able to harmonize your own voice with the voice of the entire orchestra societally. Now, I do think it's interesting that right after the conjunction, the interest rates started going up. So that's a very much a Taurus-related theme in terms of the economy and assets themselves, our actual money and resources, the value that we utilize to survive and to thrive, right? And so either that's literal food in the ground or your stocks, right? This Taurus Scorpio axis where the nodes of the moon are right now, which is what really determines an eclipse, is where the nodes of the moon are and their relationship to new moons and full moons. So we know that resources, value, the creation of more as a result of drive and passion and this deep wanting, right? That's a big part of Scorpio, really drives us to create more than what we already have. And so the North Node, though, is taking us towards the Pleiades still, towards what already is and being in communion with that. So lots of starseed lessons, lots of lessons around Lemuria and Atlantis. Really starting to me personally, dive back into those stories from a number of different perspectives. Rudolf Steiner, Edgar Cayce. I mean, those two in particular seem to offer that esoteric Christianity perspective of these stories that fit right into the starseed narrative as a whole. So there's plenty to discuss, and we discuss it a lot in the Starseed Fellowship, and there will be plenty of content to present with the Catalyst Classroom. So if that's something you're interested in, you know what to do. So we're going to have a first quarter moon on Sunday, which is Mother's Day, and this image here is, I believe it's Lake Powell. I literally just typed houseboat party, because that's going to be the Sabian symbol of our first quarter moon in Leo on Sunday evening, right? Roughly 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we know that these new moons are a crisis point. We know that it has to do with a crisis in action. How do we release and manage? How do we manage the energy that has been released? When we are talking about a new moon activation, a release of energy through the new moon, that is an eclipse. It's a partial solar eclipse. So there is we still are working with and we're still in the portal, right? We haven't even gotten out of the eclipse portal itself, because we have a full moon lunar eclipse in Scorpio on the 16th of May. So in the meantime, Jupiter goes into Aries this coming week. Mercury's going to station retrograde this coming week. And that first quarter moon and leading up to the full moon is the time frame where we really experience the tension in the first quarter square. So the houseboat party is the moon in 19 degrees Leo. And it's the idea where we really just want freedom from the socially constructed, rigid nature and just be ourselves. It's a kind of a great time to have Mother's Day, maybe coming together as a family or coming together for some sort of celebration on that day. Lots of people do things. My family, we're all going to get together and barbecue. And so nice to have a moon in Cancer leading up to that, to really get into the maternal vibes of the Cancerian archetype. So and the houseboat is kind of like, in some ways, Cancer, in the sense of it is a container, it holds but it's not the water within. You're kind of, now you are coasting across the surface. And first quarter moon, though, we have a sun in Taurus just coming off a conjunction with Uranus, where that may have been the rumblings under the surface that shifted, the composition of all of the land. And it really is with this sun at this 19 degrees Taurus, this Sabian symbol is this new continent rising out of the ocean. So if you actually got a chance to listen to the new moon forecast that I put it up for Taurus. because it was their new moon this month. You know that this particular transit is something that I talked about in that forecast, and really thought about it in terms of, we want this freedom from social rigidity. I can feel, and many of us feeling isolated, we are wanting this human connection at a very, at a very relaxed, but also authentic level, where everybody is just themselves, right? And everybody is enjoying that and enjoying each other's company and relaxing the social hierarchy, relaxing those boundaries in some ways. And so that sounds all well and good. And out on Lake Powell like this sounds really fun. And it's going to be the week following, right, leading up to the full moon, as Mercury station retrograde, as Jupiter comes into Aries. A fire planet in a fire sign is certainly going to be representing and expanding on this potential for new growth, which is really great. Venus is already here, kind of laying the groundwork, in some ways literally, and in our feelings and embodiment, but it's going to be Jupiter that's going to be like, oh yes, look at all of the things that we can become, right? So we'll be talking about that, because not Aries, a lot of Aries is related to Andromeda starseed. So it's going to be the new continent that is rising, right? Whatever Uranus kind of broke loose, regardless of where you find it, it's now this new continent, this spontaneous emergence out of the collective unconscious that we don't want to control. We want it to be spontaneous. We don't want to plan for it, but that may capsize our boat, right? That our little houseboat party. And since it is a moon, first quarter moon squaring the sun, it's really going to be within us, how we feel on the inside, how we express ourselves on the outside. So there is going to possibly even be tension in that type of environment where something new is coming out, something that maybe has stirrings of for a really long time are finally starting to make their way up to the surface, just as a result of things reorganizing themselves after the sun and Uranus came together, which was Beltane, by the way. Right? And astrological Beltane is the sun at 15 degrees Taurus. So we're coming into a whole new world here, and we want to reach out and we want to enjoy it, but we can't necessarily just bypass what is in fact coming out of the Akash, basically coming out of the ocean of the collective unconscious that is new and spontaneous and may challenge those really feel good moments. So lean into it, accept the challenge, accept that both of these things don't have to, they're not mutually exclusive, but there's tension in terms of where they're going. They're at cross purposes. So it's going to be an interesting week, and to remember that Mercury is stationing retrograde. So I know people are feeling isolated. It's all over the place, and wanting to reach out and follow it, right? Just know that there may be some really big waves as a result of expressing yourself, though, especially expressing yourself in a new way. That's the thing about Uranus. It is new. It's into the future. It is above what any one individual is saying. It is a collective frequency, and we are really headed somewhere, right? The shell of the seed at Beltane happens, breaks open every year, and this is what Beltane really stands for, right? 15 degrees Taurus is when the seed cracks open and that germ starts to push up. But it's so karmic because of the eclipse so close by. This is something this is so soul evolutionary, more than it normally would be. And so that just seems like there's just so much more at stake. But at the same time, there's so much more creative potential involved here at a soul level that it's important to follow your intuition. If you are feeling that, desire for relationship and in more interpersonal relationships, to really enjoy just being yourself and then follow it, right? And also be willing to accept the challenge of the turbulence as a result of this new energy coming out with Uranus and the sun. And this degree This degree, as we're going to see, is actually where Uranus and the North Node will be conjunct. So talk about, it's not over yet, right? This is just now starting us to feel the reverberations and the turbulence. It's going to be in the summer where that becomes a very shocking, soul-oriented emergence as well. So what are we going to do, right? How are we going to respond to this new continent that could very well be literal in some ways? Who knows, right? Just a piece of history that finally, breaks loose, and it's going to be happening for all of us in our own way at the microcosm as well. So it's coming, right? And so actually, this is a great segue into this cultivation reading, because it is for the eclipse season, which is May to November. And I think that this is, it's $99. It's a 90-minute recorded reading. We look at your personal chart, your starseed markings during this time. So do you have, practical solutions, practical expectations, forecasting what to expect in what areas of life, so that you can, be conscious co-creator of your situation rather than feel like a victim to circumstances that seem to be out of your control. So that's going to be available up until June in terms of booking. So you can go to the website and book that reading as well. So one thing I would love to share here is something I've been paying attention to and just kind of tracking for the last week or 10 days. And something has shifted in terms of, there's our chart for today. Something has shifted in terms of actual energy. Okay. So the sun certainly has not been quiet at all. It has been flaring like a lot. There are a lot of sunspots. They're very active. They are flaring a lot. There's some of them that have been fairly sizable, but they're not coming at us, right? They have been, kind of blowing off steam in every direction other than facing us. And when they start facing us, they just kind of pop and crackle, but they're not releasing anything. We don't even have any coronal holes facing us at this point. So there's not even solar wind coming in. So that's something to keep in mind. And I'm going to show you some things that have stood out to me as different, because that are leading me to conclude at this moment, at least, to suggest that something energetic truly has shifted. And that's not surprising with the sun and Uranus together. Now there are some actual things that have happened that are indicative of that particular transit, right? The interest rates going up right after the sun and Uranus come together in Taurus, right? And the sun is going to meet the North Node in Taurus also by the end of this, leading up to next weekend. So that there's a lot of stuff going on, and we knew that, right? We knew this whole time with the nodal axis in Taurus and Scorpio that this would be around soul evolution, a collective soul evolution, when it has having to do with our economy and the way that our economy works, and power and resources, where they come from, how we've created them, how all of those things. So that fits right into that as far as I'm concerned, in terms of how something new, it has to come forward. And it's the raising of the rates that's going to trigger that process, just like maybe a rumble under the surface triggers the process, and then it comes out with this emergence of a new continent. So again, things may not have seemed necessarily as dramatic with that conjunction at Beltane, but that's because you can't see it. It's all under the surface, just like the seed is making its way up. And will do so on the... right as the sun comes into Gemini, which is also when the sun meets Mercury in its retrograde at 0 degrees Gemini. Whew. Things will be a lot clearer in that moment. That's for sure. That is for sure. So here are our amplitudes. Now there is a pattern here. I've noticed already, this is just 3 days, but I've noticed this pattern for the last week, that the amplification is very much at the same basic times. You can see, now this is from Tomsk directly. So you're looking at Russia time. So just think about that. It's 11 hours ahead of the EST, or Eastern Standard. So you can see just the time frame where there's consistent amplification. It may not be the same decibel, right? It's not going to be the same volume. but it's the same time frame. And this has been happening for days now, I've noticed. It's like a rhythm, a very consistent rhythm. So here it is here, and then you could see a little small one here, but then there's another larger one right after, and then same thing. There's one here, and then a little smaller one, and then the same thing around 18 to 20, another large spike in amplification. Okay, so I've noticed that there is this pattern at time, right? And so I know sleep is hard for a lot of people. It's just ruthless. I've never been a person that has trouble sleeping ever, but I am waking up, like clockwork, 2:30, 3:30, and my cat Angus, who is way sensitive to these types of changes, and he's up with me, and we're like, why are we both awake? It's 2:30, and then going back to sleep. So even with sleep aids, I'm rested. I'm still resting when I'm asleep, but it's very consistent as well, waking up. And so something is emitting a larger field at a consistent time. So the other thing I want to share with you about this first is, just look at the space weather. Like I said, the sun is flaring, and you can make a pretty reasonable, there's a pretty consistent correlation with the time that the solar flares are recorded off the sun, because they are still flaring. The sunspots are flaring like constantly, and this spike in the Schumann. So the flare is happening, and the Schumann gets louder right around that time, even though the flare is not coming at us. So I get this like real preparatory sense here. And you can see that the sun is flaring. You can just look at this, and every time there's a spike in this graph, you get that's because it's measuring a flare. But you can also see the KP index, all of the solar wind temperature, the solar wind speed has been consistently going down, the proton density in the solar wind, right? That's like the particles that make up the plasma. That's been pretty consistent in its density, and it did go back up a little bit very recently, but you can see that the KP has been very calm. And what does that mean? We get more cosmic rays coming in at us, and that has an impact on our down to our genetic structure. You're talking about charged particles moving at near speed of light. That's what cosmic rays are, and it's one of the biggest challenges, as far as I know, for astronauts is the impact that these cosmic rays out in space have. So the calmer the magnetosphere, the more cosmic rays. Now, I'm going to show you something. I had the ability to actually to be able to show you this at the time that I actually was looking at it myself and record it, because this is the magnetosphere density. And I haven't been looking at this for decades, right? But I have been tracking it daily, for the last year. And I have never seen the magnetosphere with this little amount of density like this. So what does that mean? It means the magnetosphere, the magnetic field around the planet, is there's no density to it. It is wide open. Look, and density and pressure are linked together. Same, as there's more density, there's more pressure. Same thing. There is no pressure being exerted by our magnetosphere this morning, like early this morning. You can see here, this is 9:10 universal time. So that's 4 hours ahead of Eastern in the United States. There's nothing here. There's nothing, right? This is the most or the least amount of density and pressure I've seen of these two, which I don't know what that necessarily means, but my first thought is, well, that means our field is very, not very dense at all. There's not a lot of pressure or density behind it, yet the Schumann continues to amplify. Now, this is what I thought was really, really interesting. And then we will get into the chart, because this this was the one piece that I was like, okay, I think something actually is changing in terms of the frequency of the planet and us. And based on that, we are now wanting to reach out. We want to establish connection. We want to maybe reestablish connection in some way. We want to not feel isolated and alone anymore, or feel like that we're at odds with other people because we have completely different perspectives on reality. It has been one of the most difficult things for us as starseeds to bridge this gap between where we've been and where we're going. And I think that something significant has shifted in order to prepare us for this process. I mean, it could very well be a very large flare that has an impact, right? Especially if our field is so calm and there's more cosmic rays and there's no density, but it's amplifying. So this is what I want to show you. Make sure I'm in the right place here before. Okay. Okay, there we go. So this is the same graph as Tomsk, but you get you get amplitude, quality, and frequency all at the same time. So the thing I want to show you, so here's the same thing we just looked at, the last 3 days, all of the amplification. We see the quality, which we've talked about before, is like the tone of the, of the sound or the vibration. So if you're playing an instrument or singing's the best example here. If you're get really loud and you want to maintain the tone, right? You don't want it to get all wobbly or sound bad. You want it to sound as good, if not better. You have to make adjustments. And a lot of times what's been happening is when we have these large spikes in amplitude and a corresponding spike in the quality, showing the quality is getting better, it's getting louder, there's been a drop in the frequency of the Schumann. It goes back down to its 7.8 when it has been consistently hovering just above that. We know that it is going up in frequency. And this is not the frequency. This is amplitude. These are different things. I explained this a long time ago. I think it would be worth it to do actually one of the Catalyst classrooms about the Schumann resonance, like a whole lecture about how to read it and what it can mean. And there's a lot of people that have good content out there about it, but in terms of our own energetic process, oh my gosh, the mouse is just not cooperating. There we go. Now, this is what I think is interesting. So here's all of these things. Now, we saw that there is a spike right around here, right? A spike in amplitude right around here on May 4th. And we see kind of the corresponding, drops in parts of the frequency, okay? But not so dramatic. Some of them, yes, but not all of them. And then there was another amplification right here, or quality control stepped in. And then there was another amplification right around here and the quality increased. But what we don't see is that there was a significant drop in the pitch or the frequency. In fact, there was one spot that went up. Now, this is where I think it's really interesting. If we go back and look here real quick, we see that there's a spike up to, looks like about 30, just under 34 at this time, 1300 universal time. And instead of the frequency going down, it goes up. It goes up. Now, this one went down, but they go up. They're not dropping. Now, this one did drop in the standard fashion that we've been seeing for a while now, at least on this channel, as we've been tracking it together, that the frequency will drop back down, even sometimes lower than its own, default frequency when those large amplifications. But something is changing now. So, I mean, I am not a trained physicist or meteorologist. I am just a citizen researcher, right? And an observer, a human being observing and using my brain. So I don't know. And I haven't been at this for decades. So if anybody out there has more information, please, if this is not that out of the ordinary, but it is a distinct change in what I have seen. So I think something very much is changing, my friends. So that's my spiel on that. So let's just get into the astrology here. Now that we've gotten through so much of the other stuff here. So we talked about the first quarter moon, right? I talked about that, the houseboat, right? And the new continent rising out of the ocean and a crisis in action and all of those things. So let's look at that. And that's Sunday night. That's really going to be, the capstone on the weekend, so to speak. So let's look at everything leading up to this point. So things are exceptionally weird, right? Things are shifting, things are changing. There are a number of planets now coming into Aries, so it's really turning things on in terms of life force energy and activation and penetration and action, right? That's the Mars way. Mars is still in Pisces. And is now moving into the second half of Pisces. So now it's really working on perpetuating and perpetuating the federation, so to speak, right? Acting in a way that actually transmits what is fundamental to the collective spiritual understanding. So let me pause this one sec. But we still have our moon in Cancer. And in fact, it's actually directly conjunct Cancer as it's in a square to Chiron. So this is where we're going to start. This actually was very early this morning, late last night on the 6th. So the late on the 5th, early in the morning on the 6th, the moon is in direct conjunction. And I went outside last night and it was all hazy because it's, raining and, spring rain and humidity here where I'm at. But there was that, that crescent moon that was just shining through the fog. It was pretty, it had this really awesome, not spooky at all. It was just, it had that thin veil across it that just gave it some sort of like, mystical quality to it. I really enjoyed it. So it was in direct conjunction with Sirius as it's square to Chiron. And I actually wrote about this in the on Telegram. So I don't want to go too much into it other than to just kind of also bring in the fact that at the very same time that this is happening, the moon is also so you can see here, in a square to Chiron and is, but in a sextile to Uranus, and the sun has barely come off of, it's still within a degree of Uranus, so it's still conjunct, and then the moon comes into the sextile, bringing all of this Syrian, Starseed activation with it. So if you have Syrian Starseed markings and you know that in your chart, the moon, especially because it rules Cancer, meeting this position at 13-14 degrees of Cancer, it's very powerful, right? You feel deeply into it. And in a square to Chiron, at the same time that's in a sextile to Uranus, it is tapping into the timeless, infinite space of creation. That is really what Sirius ultimate represents, is the womb of creation. There is no creation without the space in which to create. And this always reminds me, and I know it drives certain people crazy, but God is a black woman, right? That's a lecture by Alan Watts, in that the space for creation is something that is inseparable from the creation potential, right? The word, right? The in the beginning there was the word, but the word had to come into existence in space, and that's truly what Sirius really represents, is that space in which to create. And they're also a strong guardianship nature. Syrian starseeds, as you probably already know, are energy workers and grid keepers, and they are guardians of life. They talk to the plants and the animals, and they talk to the wind and the minerals, and they are the shamans, right? These are a lot of what the Syrian starseeds are doing. And so to have this connection favorably with where Uranus and the sun were, it is, if we allow ourselves to connect to that infinite space and realize that this is where all creation truly is able to grow, is in this space within us. And we've been talking about this now for a minute, about the space. And I think that as much as it's been difficult for the isolation, and it feels very forced, and not in a way that we haven't created for ourselves, but a necessity to, filter out all the noise and be able to focus within. This is really supporting that process, and in fact is giving us the capacity to really see where we're headed as that germ is making its way up from the seed, but it's still in the darkness. It's in the and it's in the darkness, it's in the soil, it doesn't even know, it's just pushing up towards the light that will eventually lead to a root system, which is what Cancer truly represents. So you see that there is actually a capacity to emotionally awaken with this sextile, especially with directly conjunct Sirius. The square to Chiron is, I think, just a moment of like, are we going to keep, just accepting this old identity of ourselves and let someone else determine it for us, or our own guilt? I don't know. Like, that's up to you. But that square really brought it up to the surface at the same time of Uranus. It's like, of course you can, right? Of course you can, but you have to accept the breaking of the seed, which is very much related to Aries, right? The idea that, the sperm isn't the life form, nor is the egg. Both of those things are meant to, give up their sense of identity in order to create this new thing. So we are dealing with a lot of these very fundamental, I think, processes right now within our own experiences and out there as well. And then Venus is, in Aries. Like I said, Jupiter's in Aries. So soon, Jupiter will be in Aries this week. So before the full moon lunar eclipse. Which we're going to be talking about in the first Catalyst classroom. We're going to do a presentation on the eclipse and Algol and the mythology around Medusa and the ancient astrology and and how it's connected to the Pleiadians, right? Because that is, in fact, a star in the Pleiades star cluster, is the fixed star Algol. One of the worst. It's like one of the worst stars in astrology. Anyway, let's not get ahead of ourselves. We're still here on the 6th of May. We have everything we need within us. We truly, truly do. And it's very difficult when we're so used to finding it outside of us. Now, Mercury is in a sextile to Venus today. Let's see here. Mercury, pretty much at the same time. You can see they are within 2 minutes apart of their sextile. So here's Mercury in Gemini. Definitely, boy, oh boy, have the cylinders started firing. Not only with Uranus, but Mercury coming into Gemini. We're just like, oh yeah, I have a mind. I have a mind and I have thoughts, and there are so many thoughts and so many concepts and so much to say and so much to listen to. Slow your roll, because it's about to go retrograde. Even now, Mercury is starting to, pump the brakes on its, it's got, we've been looking at imagery of Mercury with its huge, tail behind it, and it is about to do an about face, which is going to seem really weird, but is going to be a necessary inner journey back to what perspective really means, and mature perspective. Oh, boy, Pluto has been just so gnarly and ruling this full moon eclipse that's coming up, and it's retrograde. It's been gnarly, so just be easy on yourselves, because it has not, it's just been, we're all going through it. So, Mercury and Venus in this sextile, Venus in Aries, Mercury in Gemini, I mean, it's... we want to reach beyond what is established in terms of ideas, right? I think that a lot of us are still caught in a loop, many of us, and it's just like, okay, how do we actually transmute out of this? And this moment in 4 to 5 degrees Gemini is the action that's initiated by wanting to reach out beyond whatever is established, right? That is part of the growth of consciousness. We don't want to stay in the seed forever, and we also don't want to just have our 2 little leaves. We are pulled into growth, and sometimes it's a violent protest, and sometimes it's just an inner process. It's in this sextile to Venus that is reminding us in early Aries still that we can transcend any situation of ourselves, by ourselves. And not to say that we need to be isolated, but I think the isolation is, as much as we don't want it, or we're feeling lonely possibly, or just kind of hopeless, it's all here to teach us how to be self-responsible and how to be fully conscious in each moment with choice, and to take a sense of sense of self-responsibility so that we are making decisions based on what it is we want for ourselves rather than waiting for somebody to tell us. And we're still there, but this sextile here is actually supporting I would say, because Mercury is going to station retrograde here, it's really Venus that's coming and investing her own sense of passion, her own sense of ambition to just be herself and to transcend any situation, and to recognize a new dimension of being. I think if we can feel it within ourselves and in our relationships, again, there's Venus involved, it will kind of orient us in terms of our mental energy and where we want to actually direct it, because we will come back to this point later with Mercury. We'll come back and out of its shadow later, and I can't remember exactly when it is right now. I have it written down, but so by that time, I feel like after Mercury comes out of its shadow, its retrograde shadow at this point, we'll have a better understanding for us, what forms are we reaching beyond and how are we going to do that in a way that actually maximizes our potential rather than getting pulled along into somebody else's process. So, Venus is so much into what she wants in this moment in terms of her own passion and her own sense of self. So in some ways this is good as long as we are aware of that and she's not just burning everything down behind her, right? And just like totally focused on herself. So as we move through today, which is, Friday, the moon's going to also be in a sextile to the sun. It's going to be in a trine to Mars. This is where we get really into our own ability to integrate our personality, right? This is a consolidation phase of the moon in Cancer. And sextile to the sun and trine Mars, that's pretty favorable in terms of, getting into some quiet inspiration or a quiet state in order to receive, inspiration from your own muse, right? And that's interesting with Mars because Mars wants to act on that. And so there's this sense of, well, you have to really know who you are. You have to feel a sense of integration of your own sense or your own self into this, this state of connection and family orientation, right? That's Cancer. But even with the sun at 16 degrees Taurus in this moment, it's what has happened, what we have gone through, there's no more, right? It doesn't work anymore. And the sun at this moment, it's like trying to go back into the seed. It's not going to happen. And so, again, if we're studying a mandala, for instance, really trying to come to an inner knowing of ourselves, this, again, is going to be activated and grow within us with this sextile to the sun when we just come to terms with the fact there is no going back, right? We're only growing up. So we may as well align with that. And it's going to be the moon trine Mars at this time. Let me find it here. Moon in a trine to Mars. Yeah, let's go. It's just like an hour ahead, right? So this is still all overnight. It's kind of funny that this is where we're at here. This is all already happened. So you can kind of do a retrospective on yourself in this moment. And you can see too that we're leading up to a kite today. Oh, that's going to be exciting. Lots of potential. It feels like there's a lot of freshness. There's a lot of potential. There does feel like something has really significantly shifted. I know that Sun and Uranus together are a big part of that. And let me make sure here. Everything is formatted correctly. Okay. Here's our moon. Our moon in a sextile to the sun, in a trine to Mars. This Mars Sun sextile is also getting very strong, and the kite though is going to be more with the nodes, so we'll get to that. But you can see just how they're all interlocking with each other. And again, this is really about, where is your output? If it's coming from a place of inspiration, of spiritual inspiration, of quiet sense so you can hear your guidance system. I know that's been really hard too. They've been, exceptionally quiet and hands off, very supportive, very close, but also just like, you have to do this. You have to figure it out as a human here. At one point this morning, I had asked something about, I can't even remember what I said in terms of, getting some sort of insight. And it was just an immediate kind of like, have you not been getting that this whole time? And I was just like, fair enough, touche. And it was just kind of a chuckle that I got, because, we can really do this, right? But we do want to be inspired from a place of transcendence and spiritual integrity, and not so much martyrdom necessarily. So it's going to be good to be quiet. And how that unfolded in your dream state is probably pretty interesting. So it's really that the moon, so we have a big buffer for a lot of today, and the moon, by the time it gets to this afternoon, Eastern Standard Time, there we go. You can see that there is a trine that's starting to build with Neptune in Pisces and the nodes and the moon in Cancer, right? Coming into 23 degrees Cancer, and also is in a sextile to the north node. It's in a trine to the south node in Scorpio. And right after that, the moon comes into a trine with Neptune, and at the very same time has a quincunx to Saturn. Okay, so let's break this down for a minute, because this moon in Cancer time today, like today in particular, we are really feeling the Cancer vibes. So I feel like that it's important to sink in to them as much as possible without, getting complacent. I think that's what Mars in Pisces is really good for. The Sun and Uranus conjunction is also, there's a lot of action in other places, so that we can kind of allow our inner self to find that stillness and that sense of stability in order to really pick up on some things and to feel into the needs emotionally of yourself and the people around you that you care about and love. But it does require getting into the feels and getting into the Cancer vibes. So if you have a Cancer in your life, you know what I mean? This is a great person to be around, because they're going to just know what it means to do this. So the sextile to the North Node is... the thing is that you have to kind of get quiet. You have to kind of get into the feels in order to maybe give form or even some sort of literary or concrete or crystallized form to something that may only be subconscious for some people. And that's the responsibility, and seems to be the case for the poets and the literary people, right? And people like us, right? That are very much in the feels. And a 23 degrees Cancer and beyond is Pleiadian starseed markings. So we are getting into a much deeper and... a much deeper connection to not only our own feels, but the feels of the world around us. And so, and considering that Rahu is also taking us into the Pleiades right now, this is an opportunity to see how we can move into our soul, the direction of our soul's journey right now by being able to almost intellectualize what we feel within us. And maybe that's something we just make concrete to ourselves, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be expressed or even, given a form outside of our own experience or our own feelings. The moon in a trine to Neptune, though, I think is where it will be expressed, because there is a sense of being overshadowed by some sort of superior power, if that makes sense. It's almost like when you create the space in order for something to come in, much like a purifying, cathartic type of experience, you will be in some ways overshadowed by the receiving of the revelation in that moment. And it only comes through our willfulness to become that vessel. So this trine to Neptune, this is going to be at the end of the day, into the evening. And so there, you might find yourself being able to go outside again and see the moon and be like, wow. You may feel that descent of a sense of knowing that is allowing for a complete dissolution of yourself in order for this purification to come forward, right? So or to pass through you in some ways, because this is where Neptune is. And keep in mind that when Mars and Neptune come into conjunction at the full moon lunar eclipse, this is the dam breaking, in its own way. It's been drip drip, and this is a flood because Mars is all output, right? And meeting Neptune like this, it's going to be like, there is no dam, right? It's gone now. Everything is just water. So we want to be able to fortify our own emotional integrity and stability in this moment. And so allow that to, get into the Cancer vibes today, because it's going to really help one establish what that feels like. Now, and right after this, you're going to see that the moon comes into an opposition to our good friend Pluto, now in a retrograde. So we also are going to have some difficult internal weighing of options here in the face of the Pluto retrograde. That has just been so gnarly. I mean, the Pluto party has been intense, but a little bit just like, okay, this is a little too much now. So whatever it is further excavating, it is always, shit that people don't want to see. None of us want to see it, and it can be really uncomfortable. It can be very unsettling. It can be very scary. It can be too much power in some ways, but it also is exactly what we need right now to just get down into the root system of all of it, the establishment, the economy, the government, whatever establishment Capricorn represents to you, especially depending on where it is in your chart. That's going to be where this has been unfolding for years now. And moon and Cancer opposite is this moment here of our capacity to weigh out. It really does reinforce every time it comes around and is opposite Pluto, especially where Pluto is right now. Our own individual capacity to follow our intuition and to know what is the right decision, okay? An intuitive weighing of options. It's not based on anything other than our own internal experience. So it's just a reminder of that as we come into the morning of Saturday the 7th. So the moon at that point is going to be moving into, first before that happens, before the moon moves into Leo, we're going to have the sun sextile Mars in Pisces and Taurus, right? This at 17 degrees, and this is really going to be assisting, transmutation. Again, this is now there is this participation in a peak experience that Mars is representing and again acting on. There's output here into this peak experience. And, this degree of Taurus, right? 16 to 17 degrees of Taurus. This is really it's almost like a repolarization of values, right? Where the Buddha has been struggling to get to the truth through all of these different means and realizing the only thing that is the last ditch effort, which is just to, just sit under the tree and just go through the process within. It's also characterized by the famous scene in the Bhagavad Gita, right? Pretty much the entire Bhagavad Gita and what it represents, where Arjuna is in the chariot and is about to go to war and he doesn't want to do it. And he's like, you know what? I don't want to do this. I'm just going to lay my arms down. And his chariot driver is Krishna, and reveals himself as Krishna to Arjuna and explains to him again, right? If you fight or if you don't fight, there's still going to be this battle happening. And so it's about being in the moment. And yes, it is down to these two options that seem like it's really just the battle within ourselves, right? And it's distilled down in some ways to this just, the ego mind and the spiritual fire, or the spiritual consciousness, right? Just battling it out, just like the Buddha did. Actually, not many people know this, but I don't know how many people are teaching this in their Reiki classes, but the idea, at least to make it more palpable to the West, when Reiki was brought to the West, is that Usui was that, he was on this spiritual journey and he wanted to understand the healing, the spiritual healing, and he went onto the mountain to fast for 20 days, and that's where he received the symbols. And then he started doing Reiki and attuning people, and he had this noble thing. It's not exactly like that. He was on a spiritual quest, but and he did go to the mountain to fast, but that wasn't what he was doing. He was so distraught because he just could not get to the truth, no matter what pathway he followed, that he went up to the mountain to die. That's why he was fasting. And in those moments where he was, so lucid from fasting for not eating for 3 weeks and just being in the elements, and they gave up, is when he received the revelation. And I'm not suggesting that we give up. It's this degree. And it is Mars here that is influencing and outputting energy in order to transmute this energy into a collective peak experience, into something that actually is being, addressing this polarization of values in the present moment that we're all kind of going through. And that's the peak experience. It can be, if we are choosing to act on that in some way. So that is incredible transit. I just feel like this weekend, is leading up to the first quarter moon is actually really exciting and lots of opportunity. The moon is going to trine Jupiter right before both of them move into their next signs, which are fire signs. So they're both going to be in a water trine with each other at the last degree of the sign that they're in. So that's the last degree of Cancer, and that's the last degree of Pisces, right? The great stone face. And the moon in the last degree of Cancer is the daughters of the American Revolution. There's a glorification of the past. There's a sense of the, prestige that goes along with this very stable system that has been built over time. This moon at the last degree of Cancer, and then the trine to Jupiter in the very last degrees of Pisces. I mean, we don't want to lose this sense of really strong stability, and there is a glorification with it. And in some ways, this is exactly, what we can wrap the meaning around, wrap around ourselves, this larger symbol of meaning, which is the great stone face, the idea that we take with us what we are clearly visualizing into the next cycle. And Jupiter literally moving from Pisces to Aries is going to symbolize the big picture of the next creative cycle and new beginnings and the expansion of all of this potential. So it's important that we know where we come from. We feel safe, secure in that we've identified these aspects and in some ways glorified them, if that works for us. And this is such a emotionally expansive moment here at the last degrees of these signs that I feel like that as we take this energy into the expansive, right, either in Aries or into Leo, we have a sense of who we are and what it means, and have be willing to step in across the threshold, right, knowing that our root system is strong and stable and supports us emotionally. And that's going to be also, I mean, you can see that the opposition to Pluto retrograde is still very much active. And so, and as much as this Jupiter sextile with Pluto is still very much active. So it will be a challenge, but we get to see where this energy can be stabilized emotionally as we are dealing with our discomfort and the tension between our own emotional security and the absolute destruction and demolition of life as we know it, right? No big deal. No big deal. Just like destruction of all reality. And how that's going to affect us all emotionally and if we can handle it or not. Oh, boy. I think we can, and I think Jupiter's going to be a big part of that process for us. Let's see. The moon does move into Leo and is in a sextile to Mercury, and then comes into a trine to Venus throughout Saturday. Let's see here. Mercury. Yep. So then the moon's in the, and then so Saturday's going to be definitely the bulk of the like, oh yeah, I'm feeling like being myself. I'm feeling like shining bright. I'm feeling like combust. I'm feeling that kundalini stirring within me. I'm feeling passionate. I'm feeling expressive, right? I'm feeling dramatic. Oh, Leo. And that's not a negative thing. That's just a word. How we look at and interpret that is really, truly up to us. But let's see here. The sextile to Mercury still, like I said, is pumping the brakes here on the transit through Gemini because it's about to station retrograde. But this moment here is, again, there's this sense of like, okay, we are feeling into the fact that there have been cycles before us. There will be cycles after us. There are towering rock formations and canyons that show that there have been planetary evolution and the evolution of the galaxy and the evolution of the universe and the evolution of time and dimensions is so vast that we can have perspective of like being in awe just for that moment. And the sextile to Mercury, I think it's very interesting in this moment, especially because it's about to station, like I said, in this retrograde, to have perspective within ourselves that, yes, we are a piece of this elaborate mosaic of reality and life, but we are truly just a grain of sand in these massive cycles. And so maybe in that moment, it will actually give our minds a lot more perspective when Mercury stations retrograde, even though it's so like put up against this wall of like, hey, it's time to do something. You do not want to initiate things in a Mercury retrograde. If you have stuff already in the works and there are things that need to happen along that time frame, sure, absolutely. But I certainly wouldn't initiate action. Let's see how this Mercury retrograde goes. Let's see what kind of revolutionary action is initiated or asked for through our means of communication and information dissemination and the ministry of truth. I mean, the disinformation, whatever, right? I mean, let's just see here what happens. And I think, again, just that feeling within us that we are just part of this, not that we're insignificant, but we're in awe of the process of life so that we don't take this too seriously. I think that that's going to be very important to consider. The moon in Leo, we just want to have fun, right? It just reminds me of Cyndi Lauper's song, Girls Just Want to Have Fun, because the moon is the feminine aspect within us, right? So that part of us does want to have fun when the moon is in Leo and is going to be in a trine to Venus. So there could be some fun here. There could definitely be some fun, some social fun, some passionate fun. This could be very much sexy fun time for people, and certainly just like strutting your stuff and feeling a sense of shining and feeling a sense of brilliance. It's so brilliant. That is definitely what I'm feeling from this transit. And we feel brilliant. We feel a sense of permanence, almost like the stars in our sky. And Venus is now starting to touch on the part of Aries where it is starting to address the polarization within us, right? And so we succeed in this moment of expressing ourselves in two places at once, right? That we can be we can be experiencer and observer. We can be in third density and fifth density, right? Whatever it is, and wherever Aries is in your chart, it's really going to show you, but it's Venus in particular. So we're going to feel it in our bodies, in our relationships. This is very interesting to me, how we can actually experience our relationships in the moment as the differences between you and other, but also the experience of communion and interpersonal reaction in this moment. And again, I think it goes back to this emotional and internalized experience and expression of our own brilliance, and the fact that our soul is not locked into this one material incarnation, that we are stardust. And so just as much as the constellations and the stars have their own really massive cycle of their lifetime related to us, we know that we're part of that. So we never actually really do die, but we just change form. And I think this is really going to assist in this trine, this fire trine with Venus and Aries and the Moon in Leo is the feminine, right? The feminine actually being able to interpret this, the feminine being able to experience and express this in some ways as well. The women are really leading the way. So great. I think it's great to have Mother's Day, around this weekend as well. So let's move on to that, actually, in terms of the transits on the 8th. The moon will be in Leo, and it'll trine Chiron, and it'll also square Uranus. Now, this is where it's going to start getting interesting, okay? So, when we have the moon in a trine to Chiron, first that degree is like we really want to kind of dramatize ourselves, like we're it's like being on a parade float or something, right? Where we're just like, hey, I'm on a parade float, and I'm in, it's a pageant, and all these, it's, look how great I am. Moves along the street, is crowded with cheering people, right? Who hasn't imagined themselves in that situation, roughly, right? This is 14 to 15 degrees Leo, right? We're moving from combustion to release in the Leo symbolic, range here, the archetype of the Leo sign, 30 degrees. So that midpoint is the combustion into the release, just like the sun, right? The combustion is the result of nuclear fusion, and the release is the solar energy that is released from the sun towards the solar system. So we're in this moment here. And we may want to release, all of our brilliance and everything that we identify within ourselves is great. And trine to Chiron, again, that's going to be really good. I think it's going to be great. I think that this is a moment here where we're going to be like, you know what? I can be whoever I want, and look at how far I've gotten so far, and to really challenge the Chiron wound, and really tap into the master teacher version of Chiron as opposed to the wounded healer, and really show ourselves like, hey, look at it. Look at this. I am able, maybe you are finding yourself being an example for people around you in this moment, or maybe you're just proving it to yourself, right? The square to Uranus, though, is where that's going to be challenged in real time, because we're talking about Taurus, not these two fire signs. We're talking about the actual nuts and bolts of reality here, which is actually the experience of the seeds splitting apart, and the adversity of the experience of traveling through the dark soil up to the light. And that's going to be the square. It's going to be like, well, do you're feeling this way, but have you actually managed to get anywhere? So there's that doubt that's going to come in too. And lean into the challenge, right? Lean into it. It's okay, because this is where we grow. And we are looking at still in Andromedan territory. This is pretty much the last degree of the Andromeda constellation, the Andromedan system, right? This is the last star. This is the last degree of fixed star in this constellation that we would consider an Andromedan starseed activation. So it's going to come up again, of course, because the North Node is eventually going to be in that range. But in the meantime, this is, can we get through the process, the difficult process, the challenge of pushing our way up through the darkness in order to have our consciousness reach the light. And this is going, it's okay to question, right? And it's also okay to realize here that Uranus rules Aquarius, which is the opposite of Leo, right? And so there's even more challenge there, because normally Uranus would be up here, and so it is not digging on Leo at all. At all. And so to have the moon here, just in general, and to have them be square like this, it's just, I sense some emotional irritation, right? Some agitation, some emotionally getting really kind of like, no, I want to share what I have, and people may not be interested, or they may be, or you may find yourself expressing yourself much more through or identifying more with the drastic Uranian types of changes. And it's very likely that people are going to be experiencing this in different ways, and we're all going to be bumping up against each other. Again, the trine to Chiron in this moment is about our own individual life force and our own individual responsibility, self-autonomy. And yes, it will be a challenge when we're experiencing upheaval in the world around us at that moment. But it is this moment here is to challenge us and to show us where we are growing, where we have grown, to kind of point back to look at how far you've made it in this process of your own growth and healing. So, and then we get to the first quarter square, right? Where we just want to enjoy our houseboat party. Oh my gosh. And at the very same time, it's actually in a quincunx to Mars. And this is really about, this adjustment here is really just about how we can allow for the investiture of the transcendental spiritual, the spirit, truly, right? Mars is acting on the spirit and the spiritual and the transcendent in this moment, and certainly for the sake of the whole, right? Through compassion and a sense of unconditional love and bravery, like the spiritual bravery that Mars and Pisces can have. So this is just an adjustment, right? The quincunx between the moon and Leo, while it's in a square to the sun, is just an adjustment, right? The square to the sun is going to be that upheaval from the new potential spontaneously rising that is, the turbulence or the waves, like, could really capsize the boat. But I feel like that the transmutation of that is really just adjusting our perspective just enough that we see and receive, right? We receive the transmission from the master, whatever that means to us. That's through our own connection to compassion, to our own spiritual avatars, whatever it is for us in Pisces, whatever inspires us spiritually and emotionally. It'll just be an adjustment, right? If you just make that adjustment, it'll be like, okay, this is uncomfortable, but I actually now understand and can create a space in which a much more dynamic spiritual transcendent experience can come through in this moment. So, and this is going to be by the end of Sunday, and so we will be together on the Starseed for the Starseed Ministry on Monday. 10 a.m. Eastern live stream, and there'll be changes going into effect starting next week. So one thing I will say is that, no, I don't think I have to say anything else. There will be the Catalyst Weekly Astrology Report that'll be posted for you on Friday. Our full moon lunar eclipse is on the 16th, which I do believe is Monday. I will not actually be streaming on Monday the 16th. I will be out of town, so I will stream on the 17th, the Starseed Ministry, but you want to keep in touch through Telegram and my email list just to know what's going on in the meantime. So, I think that's it for today's report. Like I said, Mercury stations retrograde this coming week. Jupiter enters Aries this coming week. So there will be... it'll be time to do that internal review. And so if there's anything that you have to get situated before that happens in terms of contracts, communications, any kind of digital or even analog travel back and forth, any logistics, anything like that, now's the time to really get those ducks in a row. You don't want to be making those decisions or trying to implement those things when Mercury stations retrograde. You want a system set up that allows for you to be able to do this review and proofreading period, because it's going to go back and meet Pluto in a trine again, and station direct at Algol. And this is a pretty big theme about releasing what is no longer serving us, right? And how that is part of the natural process. And that, yes, things happen. Yes, there's corruption to our bodies, there's corruption to our DNA, there's corruption in the world around us, and there is intrusion into our resources. But we also have to make adjustments and adapt to those situations. And it can be dramatic and unruly, or it could be peaceful and with some conscious awareness. So we'll have so much to talk about next week. So I'm going to leave it there for today. I appreciate all of you so very much. Thank you for being here. Everything you need is in the description box below, like I've said. And I just really enjoy being able to offer this report to you, this astrology report to you. I love you guys. Take very good care of yourselves. Have a great and loving Mother's Day, whatever that means to you. And I will see you on Monday for the Starseed Ministry live stream. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.